and welcome. Today is Friday, March 8th, and International Women's Day, and I am so excited to be featuring Lana Kevic. I know her from a birth doula course that we did many moons ago, and I just felt an instant connection with her. She has invited me to join her in the art of feminine presence, as well as performed a few womb healings on me.
Mm.
And I'm just so grateful to have her sharing this space with me today and allowing you the chance to learn some services that you might not have known were around. So,
Mm.
thank you, Lana, and welcome.
Karina, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm so honored and delighted to be here with you having this chat on this day. And I just want to say, too, how much I appreciate you as a radiant, incredible human being. And I just knew from the start, the conversations that we had and the interest that we had that you were just, on this a similar kind of journey. Like you kind of got this work. And I'm like, oh, I'd love to have her in a circle. Because for me, it's healing work for me. I'm guiding and facilitating it, but like I get a ton out of it. And so you were just that woman who like, I want to have her. And once you were there, it's like, yes, this is perfect. So yes, I love you so much, and I'm so excited to be here. Thank
Oh,
you.
thank you. I love you so much. And, without the work that we've done, I wouldn't have been able to receive that. So thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. So Lana, to kick start this talk, I really just want to know about your journey and what brought you to where you are today in business.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Well, where it kind of began for me is very different than, where and who I am right now. So I kind of talk about, recently I've been referring to it as an initiation of, like menstruation coming into life. And I think that's really a moment for a lot of us where things switch, where, it becomes like, oh, I'm a woman now, but also have these, kind of stereotypes or categorized differences come into play. And for me, it was a very painful experience, the reality of it, the messiness of it, the pain. I just realized how much of a resentment I began to build up. And even prior to that, my household was a kind of a one where my dad set the rules, and, as girls, we were expected to behave a certain way. We had limits put on us that, wouldn't have been the case if we were boys. So I had this message, like just right from the start, that there was something less than and inferior about being a woman. And so I grew up kind of very armored and very resentful and angry and hostile. And it wasn't until like way later that I got to understanding how this was impacting my life. And, it didn't work to be living a life where like, this important kind of primary part of me, this feminine woman part, wasn't respected, and never mind like actually cherished and nourished and explored and valued. Right. So I'd taken on like a lot of masculine traits and values. Right. So it was like through that experience, the menstruation was a big piece, like just, having to live with the pain of that and getting the resentment and how it's impacting all of my life and getting to this doesn't work. And actually, it doesn't have to be that way. And I discovered like this whole world of, oh my God, like not everybody has felt this way about, being a woman, about, having a period. There are many like books I began to uncover and people who wrote about just the mysticism, the power of it. And,
Mhm.
once I connected to that, it was like it's a whole new world that opened up. Right. So, to be where I am compared to like where I started, like, 20, 25 years ago, like so different, like my 20-year-old self would have looked at me, been like,
Yeah.
right. So it's been a huge personal evolution and transformation. And it
I
keeps
love that.
happening. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
still like unfolding and happening. And I don't know what it's going to look like 5, 10, 20 years from
yeah,
now either.
for
Yeah.
sure.
Hmm.
Um, I think that's so important because I feel like really in this last year that menstruation for me is no longer a burden but a blessing.
Hmm.
And I actually think it was in one of our last classes that we were in womb space, and I was in my like crone phase of my menstruation, and I just remember like thinking to myself how like sad and like longing I'm going to feel when I'm no longer
Hmm.
able to bleed each month and like
Hmm.
reproduce, and how is that going to change my creative cycle and stuff. So I think that's really great that you work with women to bring that forward and know that like menstruation doesn't have to be like messy and like gross, and it really can be a blessing. I use my menstruation now to cycle through my creative process. So that's
Hmm.
great.
Yeah, not even just a blessing, but even like a superpower,
Yeah.
right? Like, yeah, but that's not even something that I'm making up, right?
Yeah.
So as a way to really like, yeah, evolve and know ourselves, learn about ourselves, like even there's a lot that's changing around this conversation, which I'm so happy about. And even like, so the messiness, like it is messy, but you know,
Hmm.
I'm okay with it, right? I enjoy it. But like the blood itself, you know, full of stem cells, right? Like full of, you know, wisdom. I would even say consciousness, you
Hmm.
know, that, yeah, there's just a lot to discover and uncover within that. Yeah. So,
For sure.
mhm,
Was there a certain point, like you said in your 20s, like you probably wouldn't recognize the self you are now?
mhm.
Was there like a certain workshop, maybe a certain service that really called to you and made you decide to start on this path of healing your wounds as like a woman, right? I guess, well, not your wounds, but your presence as a woman.
Yeah, no, not so much. I think there was less of it going on at the time, right? Because I'm talking like in the 90s, right?
Mm,
Or less that I was aware of. But what was present, what I understood though was that I knew people for whom it wasn't the same kind of thing,
mm,
right? Where I had a friend in particular, she's like, Lana, your periods sound weird. Like, I'm fine. Like 2 days, I don't feel a thing. And I had it like, no, but period's a curse, right? Everyone's got it this bad, right? So that was actually very illuminating to have understood, like, oh, well, you know, if hers is okay, why isn't mine okay? Like, what's up with that? And then it took years more of, I don't know, I just had this moment actually of being in a workplace at a job that I didn't love, but also I used to say it was the best and worst job I've ever had, like at that time.
mhm,
And there was a moment in which something was going on, and I was asked to do something that was just ridiculous and unreasonable, right? And I flew off the handle, right? And I just made such a scene, so that by the time like it was a Friday, Monday rolled around, I had to apologize, right?
mhm,
And I thought, well, what's up with that? You know, like 2 weeks before, the same thing happened, and I was fine about it, right? It didn't bother me, but it was where I was at in the cycle, right? So that was a very good illuminating moment too of like, oh, you know, this thing about PMS, people talk about it like, oh, women goes crazy. But I actually began to see like, no, I was still in the right. This was like a ridiculous thing I was being asked, but I could tolerate it in a different phase. And this like premenstrual, it's like, I can't tolerate the bullshit, right? So
mhm,
there have been just moments in life that have illuminated things for me and gotten me to see like, oh, there's more to it than just what I've experienced or known so far. Does
mhm.
that make sense?
Yeah, for sure.
And so I got like inside of that too. It's like, okay, you got to quit this job. You know, it's like that premenstrual, we call her archetypally the enchantress, right? So that archetype, like she won't tolerate any bullshit, right? Like she just won't. And she knows the truth of things, right? And she's a fighter, also a lover, I think. But you know, you have to respect her. So anything before that, in the earlier phases of maiden mother, it might be like, oh, it's okay, it doesn't matter, but it gets stuffed in there so that when enchantress rolls around, it's like, oh, not going to tolerate it. And then the problem is because, we kind of operate not aware of this. So I'm inconsistent then from week to week, right? So someone, exactly, you should expect it should be fine. It's not fine this week. Last week it was fine. So like really honoring them. So I got like, okay, Lana, you got to leave this job. Enchantress clearly is not okay with it. And so I started making like these, like I started to see how it was all related, right? Like how I was relating to my menstrual cycle, how I was experiencing it was also impacting the enjoyment of the job I had, or even the jobs I was choosing. Yeah, it just, all these things in life kind of opened up paths. So afterward, I did come to the works of Miranda Gray, who you might be familiar with. She's the one who did the attunement for us for doing womb blessing and womb healing work. That she didn't start out doing that. She wrote these wonderful books, one called Red Moon, talking about these archetypes, maiden, mother, enchantress, crone. She really spent a lot of time working with her own cycle and looking at what are the different gifts and skills that each archetype brings, and actually working with their strengths versus working against them, right? So if the enchantress loves doing this stuff, schedule your time to be doing that stuff in the enchantress phase, not pushing to make it happen in another phase. So when you're bleeding, when you're in the crone phase, give her the time to rest and rejuvenate and meditate if you can. Like, I get it's not always possible, but also like we don't have to push ourselves to prove ourselves. And that was something that I didn't have growing up, right? It was always like pushing to prove myself against my own nature, which I had kind of executed, kind of said is wrong, because that was what I'd learned.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is like a stepping off point for a lot of people, is that they start to notice the body's reaction
Mm-hmm.
before they really internalize it and realize, okay, my body is asking me to do something. What is it? And
Mm-hmm.
like you said, like we have this superpower that
Mm-hmm.
allows us to literally see our cycles, where a male or a masculine can't. If they want to be aware of their cycles, absolutely they can. But we kind of have this internal mechanism that's like, hey, this is where you are.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I love that that's how you started to get in touch with yourself
Mm-hmm.
and really figure out who you are to honor what your body was calling you to do.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, definitely. That's how most of us come to any sort of, I think transformational spiritual work. It's through, illness of some sort, or the body like not cooperating. And it really is a wisdom and a gift, even though it's painful a lot of the times and challenging and difficult, it's a message, right? And the only way through it is through it.
yeah. Yeah, we can't stop it.
No,
Well,
don't do
we
it.
can,
Well, you just
you know,
create more of the
surgery and stuff,
same,
but
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so in saying all this, I would really like to get into the work that you offer for
Mm-hmm.
women. Let's start with your womb blessing, because that's kind of where I started with you.
Mm-hmm.
And so for myself, I was noticing a lot of my body's reaction, and that's when I really felt called to come to you and kind of clear out some of that residual stuff that I
Mm-hmm.
know it just didn't serve me anymore. I didn't need it. It served its purpose. It kept me safe in when I needed to feel safe.
Mm-hmm.
And I was ready to release it. So I really want you to speak about your womb blessings and your womb healings, because um, I think those really helped me kind of start stepping into my own. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Well, the way I came to experience it and the way I've come to see it is that we store a lot in the womb, right? And we also hold a lot just ancestrally in the womb, right? So when I talked earlier even about how my enchantress wouldn't take the bullshit, I kind of understood So I used to take a lot of pills for my period to suppress the pain. And when I decided to make the change, like I'm not going to do this anymore, I stopped. So, and I let myself have these very painful periods. And that was when I really understood what happened is anytime I disrespected myself or dishonored myself or let somebody else do it, I kind of stuck it in my womb, right? You know, it's like you don't deal with anything. You know, I'm not, it doesn't matter. I'm not going to deal with it. Actually, it went in there. So, you know, so there's things like that. Then there are actually like obvious traumas that, you know, we might experience, like miscarriages, assault, like things that get stored in there. So, in doing like a healing and a blessing, we're actually bringing in energy and a kind of divine feminine love and restoring a sacredness to the spot. Because think about, you know, how often, you know, just typically we even think about the womb. When I say that to people, sometimes it's often like very weird, like what womb, wound, wound, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of out there. Usually we're thinking about it if there's a problem with it or we're trying to get pregnant, but not actually as an integral part of who we are as an energetic source of, you know, creativity. So that's where that comes from too. Like it creates physical babies, but actually it's the source of, you know, our inspiration, of wisdom, of guidance. So I should say too, I'm not even just referring to the physical space. It's really more the energetic space. So when we're doing a healing and a blessing, it's really about clearing out that stuff, which can also be like just crappy messages and conditioning, right? That you see just out in the world anywhere, right? I feel like we hold stuff for even people in our lives, right? You know, so if I hear a story that, you know, is triggering or awful that happened to someone else, you know, it'll end up in my womb, right? So this thing of like clearing that and then allowing it in the blessing to bring in like this divine feminine like energy, this rightness to it, because that's a message and an energetic gift that like few of us have been given. I didn't get it, right? You know, growing up, that
Mhm.
it's great to be a woman, that, you know, you're a blessed being, that there's a sense of being, I come around to it as like being right as a woman. You know, we talk, there's now like, there's a lot of memes and things like about the divine feminine and the power, and you know, we're changing a conversation around that, but still, you know, even the people, the women saying it don't necessarily feel it within themselves. So it's like actually getting to feel that. And really, like, it's not even a one-time process. It's something that, you know, is a renewal, a replenishment, and a nourishment that ideally is happening regularly in some way.
Mhm. For
So
sure. Sorry.
just to say also, that's like the bit to describe it. At the end of the day, it's an experience that's going to be different for everyone. And
Mhm.
sometimes, you know, I hear from women be like, oh, but I'm scared, you know, like I don't want to, you know, visit some stuff that's, you know, been like buried or whatever. And it actually doesn't work that way. Like it's always going to be a beautiful experience. Sometimes it might be emotional. There might be things that pop up that you've forgotten, but it's never anything that you're not ready to look at and release, right? No one has ever had a bad experience in any way.
I think, yeah, that's so true because even my first womb blessing to my last one, although, you know, the rhythm was the same, my experience throughout it was completely different.
Mm-hmm,
And what I gained from each treatment was really significantly different.
mm-hmm,
And honoring that phase of life that I was in that moment. And I think that's really important to say that we know what we need to work on. Like our body is our
mm-hmm,
roadmap, and what needs to come to the surface will, and
mm-hmm.
what we will be ready for it. Like, you know.
Yeah, and the mind doesn't know it, right? The mind never knows it. It
Hmm.
thinks it does, and it's going to be something else. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I really liked how you touched on the fact that our womb doesn't just carry our emotions and our experiences, we can take that on for others. And I think that was a really important note to say, because you were talking about ancestral healing through the womb as well. And I know from listening to my mother and listening to my grandmother's experience, those experiences then became my experiences, just because it was like kind of like a folklore tale of like, don't do this or else, or um you're and that was something I really needed to release during my womb blessings, was
Mhm.
their kind of expectations of the world, and realizing that their world isn't my world that I live in now. And we are coming to a place where things are more acceptable, and I love that you talked about that. um Something else I wanted to talk about or touch on, but now it has escaped me, so I'm going to move forward. Unless you'd like to talk about that a little bit more, I would.
No, I just wanted to add the thing. I totally agree all of what you said about ancestral like stuff that we carry. And then also there's even just the simple fact that, the womb was our first home,
Mm,
so like really, really palpably, energetically, there's something that we've picked up. And I don't talk about this very much. There's not as much interest to it, but there's also work that I do with men around this as well, around healing, because again, we're all formed in the womb. We all have also like internalized junk in our heads and beings around the feminine, and there's stuff to heal. So this work is actually really for everyone. Mm-hmm.
I love that. It is, yeah, totally inclusive for sure. So, um, in saying that, um, from my womb blessings, I really had this kind of like calling to dive deeper, to get to know who I was.
Mm-hmm.
And I was so grateful that you offer a series called The Art of Feminine Presence.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been so grateful that I've been able to join in a few of those cycles. Um, and I'd love for you to share about them, because I think for me, it really helped guide the person that I wanted to be and present to the world. But it's also helped me in my business, because, like you said, the womb is my creative drive, and I'm starting to notice that more. And so it's allowed me to not feel kind of like icky about putting myself out there the way that I want to put myself out there. Um, and I want you to share more about it, because I
Okay.
just.
Yeah. So, the art of feminine presence, I discovered about 6 years ago, and was created by a woman named Rachel Jane Groover, who lives in the States. And for me, like what it was right from the start was a kind of spiritual practice for women. And what we do, again, it's so hard to talk about sometimes these things because it's so much about the experience. So
Mm,
we are together, and I facilitate, but we co-create together an experience for everyone of their feminine. So that's what I really enjoy about it, because so often, like in places, there's this reliance on, like knowledge or talking about things or figuring it out. And this is like really very clearly not that. It's actually you, me, everyone here getting an in the body experience of something, of the feminine, and then being able to share that and, mirror each other and work on bringing, this feminine energy, this feminine essence, this feminine way of being into our lives. Because I think that's what's missing. We're
yeah.
talking today, I was speaking with some other women in a group that I'm in about, International Women's Day, which is today, and, what all that means. And I was just speaking about how, there is this thing about women, getting equality and into places of power and leadership and government. But the missing piece often is actually like, but the feminine, because women might be getting up there, but is the feminine, coming alongside them? There's actually a lot of like internalized, like sexism and misogyny that we've taken on, like as women too. So it's not enough actually to have more women in power and in leadership. We actually need to bring and value the feminine principles and the feminine essences. So in this circle and in this group, it's like getting like to what that means, what that experience is like. So and coming from that space, right? Because if for a lot of women, you know, the feminine is where our joy is and where we can actually like feel powerful and feel pleasure and good in our lives, it actually burns us out to be in the masculine, to be like pushing for things to happen, to be in like competition, to be, you know, to not have enough flow in our lives, right? So we work on really being in the body, like what you mentioned too, in the womb space, like in this energetic, like when we say, you know, being grounded, that's what I say, being grounded. Like, so that you're rooted, you're grounded, you're able to be in your power, you're able to intuit the needs of the moment, you're able to be present, right? So a lot of the women who come into have an anxiety thing, right? There are things that are not feeling quite right, can't quite pinpoint what that is, right? It's like coming back to yourself, coming back to your body and that wisdom. And then working on other things too, right? Like how to be more receptive. Receptivity is a feminine energy, and we're generally pretty bad at that, right? And again, it goes to showing, we've always heard it's better to give, right? You don't want to receive and then owe somebody something. Is it safe, you know? But we can't be in a world that's always giving, 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 especially for, you know, the feminine. The feminine needs to be filled up in order to have something to give. How do we get good at that? How do we get good at like being witnessed and seen like as we really truly are, right? So just a safe space to create and explore all of these different things that I haven't actually like really witnessed anywhere else. I think this work is like very special for how it's created and what it offers. And there's just so many different like practices and things that we play with and we explore. It's just very special.
Mm-hmm. I agree completely. And I think something that what just if I can talk about my experience
I'd love
a
it.
little bit.
Yeah.
Um, I think it allowed me to have a deeper connection with myself, and by doing so, me and my partner's connection
Mm,
has um unified like so much more. And before, when we would argue or something, it felt like we were like doing this, like my point, your point, my point, and then like we weren't listening. With this series that you've done, I really I took the anger out of what was happening,
mm,
because I realized that this was his experience. He lives in a masculine world, and he will never be able to fully identify with my experience as a woman in this world.
mm,
And until your series, I didn't really kind of understand that and grasp that. I was trying to push my ideals,
mm,
like a masculine, trying to push my ideals onto him, and I wasn't honoring his space. And um, I think by doing like just saying to him like, I understand that that's how you might perceive things, but I need you to listen to my experience now. And by taking that step back and talking about the experience of being a woman instead of you're doing this to me, this is
mm,
like, it
mm,
was, it allowed him to, well, allowed me to take the blame off him, because yes, he was the one doing this and he needs to take ownership for that, but it's also the way that he's always been allowed to present himself in the world, right? Um, and it by doing that, it opened up his aura and his kind of
mm,
reception to,
mhm,
oh, you're not blaming me, you just want me to understand.
mhm.
And so that's something I'm really grateful, first of all, for you. If I do say so, our sex life has improved.
Yay.
um, so much, and feeling that connection as well, and dropping into my womb space during that intimacy created like, I almost want to say like a heat between us, right? It wasn't just two bodies doing whatever. It was literally as if two souls are
Mm-hmm.
joining together. And I don't feel, if I didn't have that awareness to drop into my womb space, my power, my creativity, my essence, that I would be able to experience that with another partner.
Mm-hmm.
But even just the way that I interact with like women, um, it's allowed me, like, I've never really been one for competition, um, but it's allowed me to put out things like Featured Femme Fridays and really show that women in business don't have to compete. We can all, like, your services are different from my services, are different from, someone else's, and they're all unique, and we can gain benefit from every one of them. And I think that is what you were talking about too, about like just the compassion and that feminine art of
Mm-hmm.
bringing that to business, and not just like, go get it, go make the money, and like come home and enjoy your stuff. No, I want my whole life to be joyful. I want everything. I want people that are coming into my life to feel that compassion within my business. And I'm really grateful for uh, that the series for helping me really, tune in to that need and that want for myself.
Yeah, thanks for sharing all that. Yeah, it's so beautiful. Yeah, you've kind of hit it all, right? Improved relationships because, you and your feminine also helps create that polarity, helps him be in his feminine. You get like the attraction that you want, like that juiciness, that thing that you said about, great sex life. Like I've heard that before from people, right? Yeah, of course. Particularly with the womb blessing and the womb healing. Once you get some of that stuff out of the way and it's, you and
Yeah.
your power and your energy is operating, like that's pretty spectacular and fantastic. And then the circles help so much with just clarity and purpose and confidence and presence, like that word and that idea of presence keeps kind of expanding and opening up for me, because we talk a lot about being in the present moment and being aware. And what I enjoy about this practice and this work too is it's a different, very feminine inspired way to get present and to ultimately then just begin to enjoy life and just feel. For me, when I first started doing the work as a participant, what showed up was just really feeling like kindness and love for myself, which, I don't know how many people out there think that, oh, I really want and I need this for myself, but it was deeply profound, at a time when things were kind of not going great in life and relationship and work, to actually come to, oh, but like I'm getting to know and appreciate and love myself, right? So that's creating, the foundation, like the good soil for, the garden that you're gonna seed and plant and sow and all of that. So yeah, it's important. And I'm so glad to hear it. Can I share? Actually, I just received an email
Yes.
before we got on, and it really touched me. I'd love to read just like this little smidgen of it, and I do have permission to share about this. Sorry, I'm just loading my Gmail. I do this work as a 5-week series. Typically, I like to have it grounded, over time. And then from time to time, I do a 1-day immersion. Some people just can't do that. So I received this like beautiful uh, response from someone who had just been. And so she said, I've been acutely aware of the feminine in the workplace and how it's not usually acknowledged as something legitimate. I'm finding this the biggest struggle right now because I'm in a new role and still establishing my own footing in this in general. I'm so grateful for the tools you have shared with me. I'm so glad that I have access to another way, where in the face of being constantly questioned on my authority, accessing my feminine power is such a useful tool in the face of masculine aggression. So like that's very moving to me, to actually be for women to have this experience and then know that You don't need to change yourself to stand your ground, to be powerful, to express your boundaries and to value your needs and to get that be communicated and understood. You actually can be in your feminine. So it's just knowing what actually that means, right? And then like once you've tapped into it, like that's where you want to stay, right? That's where like the juice is, the power is. Mm-hmm.
Mhm. Sure. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's so profound, yeah, because part of the reason why I decided to go into business for myself was because I was tired of the rat race.
Mm-hmm.
So to hear a woman in business, not for herself, but moving up a ladder and using this in that way to really ground herself and make a name for herself, not in the masculine, but in the feminine. I think that's great. Thank you for sharing that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Hmm, awesome. Wow. Okay. So we are about at the halfway mark. Um, some other things is, do you have sorry, you offer Reiki as well. So that's, is it something that you enjoy doing? I know for myself, that's what really kicked off a lot of things for
Mm-hmm.
me. Um, but how have you found that work with
Mm-hmm.
your feminine presence and stuff?
Yeah, the Reiki I actually began doing before the other two things came into life. And I'd signed up for it because I knew the teacher, the Reiki master. And I actually didn't know anything about Reiki. And so I was there that weekend, and it was a 2 day attunement and training. And I remember being in there going, oh, I should have actually known more about what I was signing up for. But that's actually often very true for me. Like the things that end up having the most kind of spiritual heft and meaning, I go into it without a clue. I'm
Yeah.
like, oh. So it felt like in that weekend, I'd committed to something just on the spot, you know.
Hmm.
But what was interesting was that it was very much in alignment. I discovered, with what I was experiencing, So Reiki, you're doing like an energetic hands-on healing. I realized like when I learned the symbols, like, oh, I used to draw this one symbol all the time, right?
Oh,
It was
really?
just part of my doodles,
Wow.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then, even after like that first attunement, it was interesting, like how often, I have energy that I'd feel like in my hands, flowing. So, and then even like since then too, I share this in a post that maybe you saw as well. Like there'll just be times when I'm in a space and I'll be like, I really just want to put my hands on you. And I feel like it, I feel it as this exchange. It's like whatever you've got, I can take it and like
Hmm.
transmute it, leave you with like feeling calm or whatever you need. So I do enjoy it. Like I think I thought about this the other week actually, and the womb blessing and healing is also an energetic work. In a healing, we're not bringing in outside energy, but in a womb blessing, we are. So I feel actually really blessed because it's like as I'm doing this Reiki, as I'm giving it, like I know I'm receiving it too.
Hmm.
It's not a depletion, right?
Hmm.
In the way that maybe like as an RMT you're getting depleted, right? There really is this beautiful, exchange. Like everybody wins, everybody gets
Hmm.
something. So yeah, I do enjoy it quite a bit. Really, like at the end of the day, it's of being in some service to someone and just seeing that whatever we've done like has made a difference.
Hmm.
Yeah, in some way, and being able to hold the space for that. Yeah, I just don't tend to do it as much. But yeah, it makes sense for me as part of, the mix of offerings.
I love it. I love that your services are like well-rounded with
Mhm.
regards to, you know, you focus on the feminine, but you also like have that offering for the masculine as
Mhm.
well. so
Mm-hmm.
that they can get in touch with it. And I
Mm-hmm.
think if someone, the reason why I brought it up was because I feel that if someone was maybe a little bit hesitant on a wound blessing as a male,
Mm-hmm.
that maybe a good Kickstarter just to get to know
Mm-hmm.
you, how you work
Mm-hmm.
with energy, that kind of stuff would
Mm-hmm.
be Reiki. And then, if
Mm-hmm.
they liked that, to move
Yeah.
forward. So,
For sure. And just to be clear, like with the men, they don't get a womb blessing per se. They
mm,
get something called the gift,
oh,
right?
nice.
So I still like to see it as a blessing, right? But it's like a blessing from the feminine, the divine feminine.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we're going to catch up to that at some point, but it hasn't been a lot of men who have taken me up on it.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of men
Mm-hmm.
who ask for my services, and
Mm-hmm.
but the ones that do, I'm always like, yes, please come, spread the word, know that this isn't like hokey and stuff.
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
So that's great. Um, so what I would like to ask now is just what advice you would have for a woman who's maybe thinking about going into business for themselves. Um, Being a woman in business, I know that it's not always easy. There's definitely like downtimes when it's like, okay, is the work that I'm doing worth the work that I'm doing? Right? Like,
Mhm.
um, so how would you like what would you say to someone to keep them going or even just to get started in their journey with that?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know that I'm the best person to ask, but what I'll say that has been helpful to me is to just keep learning and, like expanding and learning what there is to know, right? Uh, because there is so much. So, like I've got this offering that I do, but then like I also need to know the marketing aspect. There's also like the admin stuff. Like there's a lot of different things, and just to find and keep developing myself, like that's something that I value and that I think is important. I think the other piece that's important and that I'm not very good at is just asking for help, like
Mm,
actually asking and being receptive of the people that want to help you. Maybe also just to be okay to take some risks, put yourself out there. Don't procrastinate. I don't know. Maybe this has been my little like chat to myself is that like if I'm hired for someone else for a job, like I'll know exactly how to go in and take care of things and prioritize. So actually like take that on for myself too. Right? Like okay.
mhm. Like if you were your own boss, what would you? Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I think that is like so true. Um, and I think too, like the things that you touched on are things that seem to come more naturally to men, right? Like marketing themselves, like putting themselves out there. Like it's kind of like it's I don't know, for me it's hard. I feel like I'm pushing my ideals onto someone else, but at the same time I know the work that I do is good work, so it needs to get done. Um and then you said taking that risk, right? And asking for help. I think as women, we're a lot of times just expected to do,
Mm,
like be it in the home or in the workplace, and that is so hard
mm,
for me too to
mm,
really say, okay, I don't know where to go from here. I don't
mm,
know how to market this, and it hasn't been until recently that I've like reached out to other women who do the same services that I do that are like, how would you do this? Or like, does this
mm,
like thumbnail look good?
mm,
And using those resources. And what's great about like having a community of people that do the same services and stuff is that you're not always having to pay per se, but it's like this exchange, and it builds your connection even more, and it really
mm,
builds that community of like women working with women to help society on a whole. And so I
mm,
think that's true. Those are good advice, and I
mm.
think that
Yeah.
something that a lot of women struggle with.
Yeah, I think having like a group, a community, which you touched on, is helpful and important. People who are compassionate and sometimes because you can't see your own stuff, right? It's so easy to get like caught up in it. So to be able to share that and then have it reflected back at you, have the brilliant ideas of other people, right, come your way, the suggestions. I do want to say something though, because you said this thing about how you think it's easier for men to just sort of be out there and,
Sure.
share their thing. Part of, I think, what comes up inside of that is that actually, like, especially if we're talking to the internet, that, women just also get trolled a lot more, right? They're the
Mm,
target of a lot more sometimes awful things, and seeing that and being aware of it can keep us, kind of afraid and, rightfully so. So there's also something within, within acknowledging that and, I was just trusting, what's right. And I guess also not just following what other people are doing. So getting clear on, like what is it that I want to do and brings me joy and, and how I share
mhm,
it and how I do it. I could
mhm.
talk about this actually for a long time too. I realize more stuff's coming up, but
Yeah, no, that's okay. I mean, you're welcome to talk about it. I appreciate you expanding on that because I think that is a very good point.
Mhm,
And I think that is kind of what I was trying to say is that um, we are judged
mhm,
very kind of harshly for the the intentions that we put out into the world, right? And um that is probably why it's easier for well, seemingly easier for
mhm,
a man to put his stuff out there and just be like, whatever. Um, Another thing that I was going to add as you were talking is something I've really found within my own business is not to be tied to the outcome.
mm,
So like how you said, I'm doing this because it brings me joy and it sparks like a passion within myself.
mm,
And so when you do that and you're not tied to the outcome, when that kind of if
mhm,
you do get negative feedback, then you're saying that's okay, then that's not for you, and I don't need to concern myself with you, and
mhm,
I'm gonna move forward. So
mhm.
I think that was a great expansion on what I said. So thank you for bringing that forward.
Mhm,
Um, we have about 10 minutes left. Is
mhm.
there anything you would like to say or do before I kind of move in? I want to make sure that I'm honoring your space for sure.
Um, I just I don't know. I'm just feeling very grateful again for the chance to talk to you, and also you as someone who has experienced some of this work and is in alignment with it and gets it. I feel like we covered quite a bit. It's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, this has been a juicy topic, and I've just been like getting like chills the entire time we've been talking. It's like hard to contain my excitement and not just be like, yes, no. um, so what I will ask you before I kind of allow you to share the spaces that you hold for women
Mhm.
um, is for me, I like to start my day with kind of like an affirmation of gratitude. So I really like to wake up and um, thank, for me it's the universe, what happened yesterday, the dreams that I had last night, and then whatever is to come the next day. And my mantra for this month is it was something different, but I've noticed since the new moon something has been coming up in me
Mhm.
to just honor, to
Mhm.
whatever is being shown to me, whatever is coming my way, to honor it, and then either send it with love, embrace it with love. Um, so those are kind of my mantras and affirmations that I have. I do it on a lunar cycle. Um, but I'm curious to see like what or hear if you have any something that kind of helps you get through the day.
Well, it depends on the day, but definitely, so I have like different things that I'll draw from. what I've been enjoying doing and what's been making a difference for me lately is, getting up and just affirming this connection to the source energy and this divine energy, and coming to commit to coming from a place of like divine love. So, because I've been thinking too, like how interesting it is that, we will qualify the word love with the word unconditional sometimes. I'm like, this just goes to show you we don't know what love is, right? And we're like distinguishing. So actually this idea of divine love has been just very expansive to me and very connecting to this greater thing, because it's so easy to get pulled into the crappy things that are happening in the world. So just to remind myself and to reconnect to that. So I like to start the day with just feeling that. So that there is a verbal expression, but also just like really feeling it, so I can come back to it when I lose it. Like, why am I here? What am I doing? Like, what's the starting point? Like, oh yes, it's that. So that's the piece. And then like you had mentioned a mantra, maybe it was just earlier when we were just you and I talking, but one that's been often like a really good one for me has just been this mantra of like, I trust, so I gotta trust, because sometimes things won't show up the way that I thought they would, or I thought maybe I deserved or whatever. And just to say, okay, again, I've got this, I just trust that, this is for whatever purpose that I may never know or see, the thing that has to happen right now. So I think that too is a kind of feminine energy to come in, right? To know like where there are actions to take and things to control, and where it's like, I trust, I can't, there's nothing for me to do here.
I love that. I love the divine love. And I think I might start using that instead of unconditional love, because
Mm-hmm.
unconditional love has no boundaries. Divine love does. And I think that's a really great distinction. So thank you for
Mm-hmm.
bringing that forward and then sharing your mantra with us as well
Yeah.
as I trust. Because surrendering is, I know, very hard for me. I am like a
Yeah, a hard
controller. I
problem.
need
Yeah.
to fit in my box. No, I'm just kidding. um, so how can we connect with you if we are wanting a service or to join
Yeah.
in on your series?
Yeah, well, I've got like all the regular ways to connect, and I can type them out in a comment. That may be easier, website, Facebook page. I'm not so active on Instagram, but the stuff is in person. The womb blessing and healing can be done remotely, so we can set that up, and it's still a beautiful, powerful way to experience. I do that on the days of the full moon only, just because that's the energy that we're working with, and there's a real difference that I've noticed doing it when it's full versus just like any old time. This is a special thing, right? So there's part of the ritual that helps amplify the energy. So womb blessing, womb healing, full moon, anywhere in the world we can set it up to do. And then the circles are things that I do in person. So online stuff is great. And then, there's also a need and a space for like in person. Some of the stuff we do is very intimate, vulnerable work, and part of really like a big part of the power of it is in being with other people and in that setting, in that intimate way. So, and I do pretty regularly, about every 6 weeks or so, an introduction to the work. So you get a little sample of what we do and the experiences. And I don't charge for that. That's like my gift, and your opportunity at no risk to check it out and see, because it's actually not for everyone, right?
Yeah.
It is not for everyone. And, part of it is an opportunity to see whether or not it's the right fit. And so I lay some of this out too. Like, you have to, if you are someone who needs to know what's going to happen next, or like control things too much, this is not going to be the place for you, right? So it's like, we just talked about it too. There's this thing about like receiving and surrendering. So, I'm going to create the space, and you got to be willing to follow where it's going to
Yeah.
take you. So there's, in a sense, like a bit of an application process or interview process, right? I mean, it's not as stringent as all that, but just so that, is it a fit? Is it a fit for you right now, right? Because that changes as well. It might not be right now. It might be like down the line. So, yeah, so what I'll do is I'll just post the links where all this can be discovered. The next introduction to the work will be at the end of March. And then I'm starting a series. They're in 5-week chunks, but ideally someone is willing to commit to more, because there's no end to what there is to uncover and discover. So it's just like, how deep are you willing to go? But 5 weeks will be a start. So I'm starting the next series next Friday. I'm doing them right now, Friday nights in Toronto. And then there'll be a Wednesday night that I'm going to add in April.
Oh, perfect. Okay, keep me posted on that, because
yeah,
not to, but that's something I have been missing, because it is on the Friday nights, which is fine. That works for, obviously, like the collective and you, and but it is something that I'm like, I want to get back into it, because I do feel a lot more connected to myself and my presence, and just like connected to the feminine entirely. So that's awesome that you're going to be, doing that.
Yeah, well, I remembered when I was taking it as a participant, and it was initially Monday and then Wednesday nights. And the way it kind of occurred for me was like, it was just this space where like I could just drop things. So as soon as I walked in, I'm like, oh, thank God I'm here. I've left, like all the outside world stuff outside. And it was actually really wonderful to have like 3 hours where I didn't have to be in charge of anything. I didn't know what we were going to be doing, because it's always like a different practice that we pick. And like just this, have a space where somebody else was holding me, So I think that's the thing that burns us out a lot too, is this like just having to be like making so many choices all the time, like having to be going places all the time, all of that kind of thing, like overactive, energy up here, versus like, I'm just going to drop into my body. I'm just going to feel good. And, I'm going to let someone else guide the way. And so it felt like it kind of felt like church in a way, but in a good way. I had never actually experienced church as a spiritual thing, but as like a spiritual kind of spa every week, And then, Wednesdays were cool, middle of the week. So we're like, okay, we're cleared. Cleared the hump day. And now another week to like take this feeling good, and just, be with it. And then knowing that next week I'm back again. So good. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, I'm glad. So the introduction will be at the end of the month. You're starting a new series this Friday, or
next Friday? Yeah, the 15th. Yeah.
And then you'll get into a little bit more. So I do recommend signing up for Lana's mailing list, if that's all you do, just so that you can kind of keep up to date for it, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Stay in touch.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Lana, for joining me today and just sharing your gifts with, the people that have joined us, the people that will join us later. It's been truly a pleasure. If you would like to get in touch with Lana, or either herself or myself, will drop that in the comments. But I'll also have a post tonight where you can just easily access it and go from there. So I hope everyone has a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful International Women's Day. Celebrate yourself, celebrate your sisters, celebrate your coworkers, everyone. And don't just let it happen like today. Let it keep going like throughout. But just let this serve you as a reminder that the women in your life work very hard, and they deserve to be honored in whichever way is being called. So thank you again.
Thank you.
I will see everyone next